after John Cochrane resigned. He would do so again in 1964 when Alan Brown quit the club. "How much is that, Tom?" Anderson asked. "He'll probably offer you £3 a week, maybe 4. Ask for 7. Anderson also came from a mining community, Hordern, not far from Sunderland, where his father Jim worked underground until the chest problems that were the coal miner's lot caught up with him. When his health failed, Jim Anderson was found a job working above ground on what they called the Hordern Aerial Flight. This was a ropeway suspended between pylons that carried coal waste to be dumped out in the North Sea. Not far enough out, though, to prevent the local beaches from wearing a heavy coat of black coal dust. For a full week's work, Anderson Sr. received no more than £8. "Are you sure, Tom?" Anderson, a shy lad, did not relish the prospect of having to negotiate with Crow. Nobody did. Crow was small and grey-haired, with a face distinguished only by its pallor. If he had a lighter side, he regarded it as a vice to be exercised in private. "Yeah, you'll get it," Irwin assured him. "Okay, Tom. But don't tell anyone I told you." Full of trepidation, despite having his father beside him, Stan Anderson knocked on the door of George Crow's office. Crow greeted them with as much warmth as he could muster. "We're going to sign you on as a full-time pro, Stanley," he said. "Thank you very much." "We're prepared to offer you £4 a week." Anderson, who had shared Irwin's advice with the family, watched now as his father cleared his throat and prepared to speak. Anderson Sr. was only marginally more worldly than his son, who held his breath, waiting for the reply. "Oh no, Mr. Crow," he said, but still could not quite find the courage to ask for the full outrageous amount Irwin had suggested. "I think Stan is worth £6 a week." Young Anderson looked on as George Crow froze, his face suddenly a rictus of incredulity. The usually phlegmatic secretary was struggling to keep his composure. For a moment, Anderson thought Crow was going to faint. £6 a week? You can't ask for that." "Well, why not?" Jim Anderson asked, with not a huge amount of conviction. £6 a week? Just a minute." At this point, Crow hurriedly left the room. He was gone for 10 minutes. "You've given me such a shock," he said on his return. "I can't possibly give you £6, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 5 plus a £10 signing-on fee." Anderson looked at his father, willing him to say yes. He would have been perfectly happy to settle for the £3 or £4 that Tommy Irwin said Crow would offer. As his father hesitated, Stan thought, "I'm working on a building site at the moment and getting £1.8 bloody shillings for a 5-day week, and here's a fella offering me £5 plus a tenner for signing on to play football for a great club like Sunderland." Fortunately for young Stan, his father, who had never seen a £5 note in his life, was having roughly the same thoughts. It was all he could do not to reach out too quickly to shake on the deal. George Crow, meanwhile, fretted over whether he had set a precedent that would ruin the club, despite resources that meant it was known as the Bank of England. At the signing-on that followed, Crow handed over the 2 £5 notes that were Anderson's reward for committing himself to Sunderland. Anderson took them and handed them to his father. "Here you are, Dad. You have them." "Are you sure?" his father asked. The same 2 fivers stayed in Anderson Sr.'s pockets for the next 10 years. He took them out only when he went to the Buffalo Working Men's Club, the Buff, in Hordern. "Look at these," he'd say to his mates. No one else had a fiver around Hordern in those days. This story, told me by Stan Anderson, was one of hundreds I heard as I travelled the country talking to the last generation of professional footballers who played in the era when their wages were capped. It was a story of a time when the men who played for the great football clubs of Britain shared a bond of borderline penury with the fans they entertained. It was almost routine for players to travel to matches on the same public transport as the fans, and after the game to return to homes that were as modest and basically equipped as those in which supporters lived. Quite possibly, player and fan were next-door neighbours in a street of working families' terraced houses. Anderson signed for Sunderland.